Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar. I am Paul Carpinella from the CLAVIS Insight Marketing Department. A few housekeeping items before we begin. All participants are on mute for this call, but you could ask questions at any time by entering them into the Q&A box located on your participants panel. Let's continue the conversation in today's webinar. Make sure to follow hashtag #ClavisReviews during the webinar to share your questions, key stats, and insights from today's presentation. Today's webinar is brought to you by CLAVIS Insight. Our cloud-based SaaS platform enables manufacturers to improve performance in online stores by better understanding how their products and brands are represented across online retailers. You can learn more about CLAVIS Insight by listening to our brief overview at the end of the presentation, or visiting our website, clavisinsight.com. Now I'd like to turn the presentation over to my colleague, Danny Silverman, to provide some brief opening remarks and introduce our speakers. Danny, over to you.
Great. Hi, everybody. Thank you, Paul, and welcome to our webinar. When it comes to online product detail pages, image accuracy, titles and descriptions, and search optimization come to mind. While we also know the importance and impact of ratings and reviews, there is less certainty around how to influence average ratings or review counts. To demystify this critical topic and share some case studies, we are excited to be joined today by Richard Scarden of BAZAARVOICE and Jenna Spivak-Evans of Unilever. Richard is a client partner for global brands at BAZAARVOICE. In his current role, Richard and his team advise brands and manufacturers on how to develop a comprehensive consumer-generated content strategy. Jenna is the Associate Digital and E-commerce Capabilities Manager for Unilever. In her role, Jenna ensures that new digital and e-commerce innovations and best practices are applied across Unilever's brands and in partnership with retail customers. Rich, first, over to you.
Great, thanks, Danny. So, thanks for everybody for joining this afternoon, and thanks to both Danny and Paul and the team at CLAVIS for inviting me to speak today, and of course to Jenna from Unilever for participating with us too. So as was already said, my name is Rich Scarden. I'm a client partner at BAZAARVOICE, where I manage a team that's focused on our largest enterprise brand clients, including Unilever, out of our New York City office. Previously, I was based in our London office, where I worked with our largest retail clients in the region, so I've got a pretty good experience on both sides of the fence. I'm on the client success side of the business at BAZAARVOICE, so our role is to help our clients realize the best possible value from the programs that they're buying from us. So really a lot of that's around sharing best practices and, of course, solving any issues that may occur. So just to give you guys just a little bit of background around BAZAARVOICE. So BAZAARVOICE is a world leader in software and services focused on generating and using user-generated content, or as actually we like to call it within the business, consumer-generated content. So our portfolio includes ratings and reviews, which is going to be the main focus of the conversation today, as well as question and answer, social content curation, and shopper advertising services. So we were founded in 2005 out of Austin in Texas, so it means we've got about 11 years of experience right now in the space. And we actually sit just behind Facebook and Google as the world's third largest generator of impressions online, which currently means we actually appear on some 700 million devices every month. So we're a global organization. It's obviously really important to partners like Unilever, and currently we provide moderation of all of the different content coming into the network in 37 different languages. So we're committed to ensuring the authenticity of all the content that passes through the network, and we invest quite a lot in that moderation side of things, as well as having pretty in-depth fraud protection systems. And so quite often you'll see some of our clients will have, as you can see on the top right-hand corner there, the BB Trust Mark, which shows that those reviews have gone through that rigorous process. Overall, we have about 4,000 retail and brand clients, so we have one of the largest networks globally, which allows us to share content through syndication, which really allows us to amplify the value of the content that we're collecting. So if we go to the next slide, please, Paul. So just to give you guys a bit of a thought around why reviews matter. Obviously, the first reason is that they matter to your consumers. We'll come back to that in just a second. But there's a lot of business benefits to the review content as well. So first of all, the sales impact. So ratings and reviews has a pretty dramatic effect on conversion levels, with up to 52% increases in conversion when you have reviews on product pages, where it's displayed versus not. Another big benefit is in driving traffic to your site. So you can expect a good organic search lift of between 15 to 25% when you have reviews in place. And the reason for that is actually that Google and the other search engines really favor fresh content, and reviews provide obviously just that, with another core benefit being that reviews are being written in the way that consumers talk about your products in real life, which is also how consumers are tending to search more these days. So there's a lot of long-tail search benefit. Insights is another core benefit. So you can think of your ratings and reviews program as like having a non-stop consumer panel running. So through that moderation process I mentioned, we can help spot common themes and help you to actually improve and adapt those products, so that you can potentially save quite a lot in primary research in the marketplace. Finally, improving the reach of your communications by actually leveraging the consumer-generated content is another benefit. So taking this content and adding it to your broader marketing efforts, we've seen really good increases in the efficacy of that marketing. It's consistently higher than where consumer-generated content has not been used. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So one of the areas that we spend a lot of time talking with our clients about, and I know Jenna's going to go into some more detail, is around driving review volume. So as you can see from this chart, there really is no such thing as too many reviews. You definitely get the biggest gains in conversion lifts between 1 and 50 reviews, but there continues to be an incremental gain as the review numbers go up. So, this in conjunction with that freshness piece that I mentioned on the SEO side is a reason why ratings and reviews should be considered kind of an ongoing part of marketing plans rather than just a one-off activation. If we go to the next slide, please. So coming back to that question of, why does this matter? I think, a key piece is obviously what consumers think. And research from Nielsen shows that 92% of consumers actually trust earned media above all other forms of advertising. So that's pretty big in its own right. And then actually specifically when BAZAARVOICE dug into looking in the ratings and reviews piece on its own, we found that consumers actually have 3 times more trust in reviews than they do in brand advertising. So it's fair to say that it's important to get this content in front of consumers on those PDPs to actually help them make the right decisions as they go through the decision journey. If we could go to the next slide. So whilst we spend a lot of time working with our clients to both drive and use their content, which again Jenna will come on to in more detail, we also spend a good deal of time helping them to understand the ROI of the content that's generated as well. So as you can see on this chart, we've actually identified 7 different areas of ROI from a reviews program. On the left are those which you would say are generally more measurable. They're typically where we start when we're looking into ROI. So you can use your analytics programs and so on to dig into a lot of those factors. And then on the right are those which we would say, I guess, are a bit more subjective and a little bit harder to measure. But we try to take both into account when trying to understand what that total revenue impact looks like. If we get to the next slide, please. Theory. Yep. So one of the big advantages of the scale that BAZAARVOICE has, of course, is our ability to help our clients to benchmark against their peers. So here you can see some CPG benchmarks, which cover a range of different quite interesting metrics. A couple that really stand out to me is that, first of all, that average rating in the space is actually really quite high. And that's actually not untypical. It's something we see across a lot of different categories, is that actually when you do ask consumers for their opinion on products, they're actually generally very, very positive. So it's a really consistent theme we see across the board, and I think it's one of the fears people have before getting into a reviews program is that they're going to just get negative content, and it's really very much not the case once you actually are proactively driving that content for your sites. Another piece that really stands out, I guess, is the conversion lift as well. So 27% uplift is pretty impressive when you consider that the CPG category as a whole, you could argue, has quite a lot of lower consideration items in there as well. So just another kind of interesting piece which helps to validate that, that ROI piece for sure. Next slide, please. So another area of the ROI story that's really important to a lot of our clients and that we've been digging into a lot recently is the effect that these reviews can also have on the offline purchase of items as well. So this is what we consider research online, buy offline, or robo effect. So we spent quite a lot of time digging into this, as I mentioned, and it's particularly of interest to our clients that don't have transactional sites, because they're trying to understand, what's the benefit of this content when they actually are then ultimately purchasing elsewhere. So this could be through the syndication, or this could be just through their offline sales as a whole. So we teamed up with about 20 of the world's biggest retailers and hundreds of different brands to find out what's going on. If we go to the next slide, I'll give you the headlines of what we found. So there were two kind of big stats that came out of this. One was more of a validation. So BV had already done quite a lot of research into people using reviews for online purchases, but it was good to validate that 54% of those online buyers are reading online reviews with some very up-to-date data. So that was pretty important and impressive in its own right. But I think the piece that was surprising and was perhaps higher than we even anticipated was that 39% of in-store buyers are actually reading online reviews before purchase. And that's the average across different categories, which if we go to the next slide, I can dig into. So here's some stats that basically show how that broke down for different categories. So again, this is people who are researching online and then purchasing offline. And, I guess in areas that you'd expect, so, big ticket technology items, so appliances and so on, we did see pretty high levels of engagement there in the review content, as we kind of expect. So 41 to 58%. Something that actually surprised me a little bit was actually even in the food category, which is a space that you would argue there is quite low adoption of online purchasing at this point. The offline element is being influenced by the online content to the tune of 19% of consumers actually reading reviews. So, again, something that you would either consider potentially to be relatively low consideration, or certainly something you maybe wouldn't anticipate that online research happening, I think just emphasises that actually there isn't really any product category that ratings and reviews don't have some applicability to. Okay, if we could click to my last slide. So for my final slide, before handing over to Jenna, I just wanted to talk very briefly about our approach to a program, which I think sets up Jenna nicely for talking about her different sections. So there are a few different pieces that the client success team work on with our clients at BAZAARVOICE. The first is that we focus on the type of content. So as I mentioned, ratings and reviews really by far the biggest part of our business and what we're really known for. There's other pieces like question and answer, there's other pieces like visual content, social content and things. So we really want to consider around, is it the right type of content for that particular part of the consumer's decision journey? So that's kind of where we start. Then we actually come back to that question around volume. So having all the content there, or having the different types of content, is only valid once you have sufficient volume of that content to actually have some impact on the consumer's decision. So we talk through a lot of different volume driving strategies. Finally, or not finally, the other factor there is reach. So actually making sure that we get that content. Once we've got the right type of content, we've got enough volume, we want to make sure it gets to the right places. So this could be through some pieces around like search optimization, but then also thinking about where we're actually placing that content, again, in that consumer journey. And then the final piece that we focus on is really helping our clients to drive insight from the content as well. So, is there ways we could improve these products? Could we take this 4.5 star product to be a 4.7 or 4.8, and really, again, further increase that conversion? So I'm going to hand over to Jenna now, who can talk to what all that actually means in the real world. And by all means, do feel free to reach out to BAZAARVOICE if you have any questions. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Rich. Hi, everyone. My name is Jenna Spivak-Evans, and I'm the Capabilities Manager at Unilever, where I vet and evaluate new digital solutions and vendors across our own properties and in partnership with our retail customers. I also manage the existing relationships with our current vendors, and we are a client of BAZAARVOICE, who provides our team with guidance and also provides the syndication technology to get our reviews to retailers. So first I'll talk about how Unilever brands are creating review-driving campaigns. So before you start anything, it's really important to set those benchmarks and goals based on some of the insights that Rich has talked about earlier in this presentation. We've instructed our brands to try and achieve at least 21 reviews per SKU with an average rating of 4 stars. You know, many of our brands will exceed this benchmark, but it's really important for our brands, especially those with larger assortments, to keep this in mind, because so often brands are really focused on their new product launch, that new innovation for the year, and we want to make sure that we have full coverage of reviews hitting this benchmark for the full product assortment, because we know that when we do, we see a lot of benefits. We can drive about 50% less traffic to our product pages per order, and we can see about a 1.5 times higher conversion rate. Additionally, we really need to remember that recency is a factor when it comes to reviews. Like many of the products that we all sell, reviews have a shelf life as well. Consumers know that products can change, packaging can change, and so reviews that are older than a year aren't seen as relevant to consumers. So we ask our brands to really keep in mind that they should always be trying to drive those 21 reviews with a 4-star rating every year. The next slide, please. So once you've set those benchmarks, there are 2 primary ways to really hit those rating, volume, and recency targets. The first are some evergreen tactics, and while they are applicable to really any type of product, your new innovations or reformulations, it's a really great way to support your core products. Often it's as simple as asking, how am I currently engaging my consumer? What collateral or samples do I already have planned to send out? And really having your brands keep in mind that simple tweaks to their communications can help drive review volume. And then, so those more targeted, larger scale tactics can be really beneficial for new product launches and reformulations. Because you're typically engaging a larger audience and are incentivizing those reviews in some way, whether it's through a free sample or a coupon, you tend to see a larger volume of reviews. And this is a really great way to launch a new product with a healthy number of reviews that will provide the consumer with the confidence when they're considering purchasing a product that they may have never tried before. Next slide, please. So just to dig in a little bit more, those evergreen tactics can really be simple asks and can be integrated into your brand communications or your site maintenance calendar. So as an example, our Hellman's team tested, whether banners within their email callouts would drive reviews, and they found that whether it was a header banner or located at the footer of the email, they drove about the same volume. But what a really interesting learning here is that these inclusion of these asks in an email actually drove the same volume as a sampling program that the brand achieved. And so, we always try to remind our brands that these review programs don't have to take up a large portion of your budget. They don't have to take up a lot of your resources. They can be integrated into your communications that you already have planned. And on a similar vein, our Dove Men's team, our social team, has been responding to consumer comments on our social posts. And when they see a consumer talking about a product, talking about how much they love it, how they're a loyal user, they would always naturally engage that consumer and carry on that conversation. But now they're also directing the consumer to leave a review on our brand site. And while it does drive a small amount of volume, every little bit helps in achieving that 21 reviews per SKU. And it really makes this interaction much more valuable to the brand, and then also makes the customer feel special, that we want to hear from them, that we want them to share their opinion and help influence and inform other consumers like themselves. And then, the last example on this slide, our Dove.com team has a placement on their homepage that rotates a different product in every so often to drive reviews. So, whether the team is looking to support a new product innovation, or maybe one of their core products needs a little ratings and review love, they're able to really switch this in and out based on the brand need. Next slide, please. So sampling and sweepstakes are a really great way to activate your advocates. When executing these programs, whether you do it in-house or through a third-party vendor, you can include collateral pieces that educate the consumer on how to use the product or the product benefits. And often, this allows the consumer to be better informed. They know how to use the product, especially maybe if it's a new format that they may not have encountered before. And so they will often have a better experience, which will lead to better informed, better quality, higher rating reviews. It's important to note, though, that the FTC has really strict guidance around the need to disclose if a review has been incentivized in some way, and that's anything from a free sample to a coupon, no matter the value, to sweepstakes entry. And so we work with BAZAARVOICE using a simple submission link or an SS URL, and so this allows us to automatically tag if a consumer has received some sort of incentive. And so not only will this badge appear on the reviews that live on our brand sites, but when the review is syndicated through the BAZAARVOICE network, the badge will also be visible on our retailer sites as well. Next slide. So many marketers think that once they've run their review driving campaigns, they're done. They've checked off that box. But, there's really a lot of great content that consumers are creating, and a lot of really great insights that we can get from this information. So why, let it go to waste? So one example of that is, as Rich had kind of touched on before, we know that reviews have a really great impact on SEO. It's because the shoppers are best at using shopper language, and they're likely using the same terms and words to leave a review as they are to search for that product online. So in this example, the Q-Tips team mined reviews for common product language that helps them not only inform their SEO strategy, but identify their keywords and influence how they named their products online. Additionally, consumers mentioned benefits that really matter to them, as well as common product uses that can really help shed light on areas where maybe our brands may want to develop content further. Next slide. Additionally, you can really dig into some of the review insights and see how what those common ways consumers are pairing your products. With the BAZAARVOICE workbench, their back-end system, this may require you to go in and maybe look at reviews that have not been approved for some reason. If maybe they mention a competitive brand, we might not have them go live on our site. And so you could either identify potential non-competitive partners where you could do some sort of joint merchandising program together, or in this case with Tresemme, you can find beneficial ways to help build a regimen, which is really important to our Unilever brands, especially our personal care category. So in this case, we found that consumers commonly mentioned using dry shampoo to help extend the sleek looks achieved with the Tresemme Keratin Smooth range. And so this insight was really valuable and was able to influence not only communications on the brand site, but also email communications as well as retailer promotions. Next slide, please. Additionally, as we kind of saw with the Q-tips example, where review content and digging into that content can help identify areas where you might want to develop additional product content for your brand. You can also gather information when a consumer submits a review, and that can help you validate a claim, which you can then use within your marketing materials. So in this example, the Simple Skincare brand already collects a lot of data on skin type, where a consumer shops, if they're a new consumer, via the review submission form that BAZAARVOICE provides. So by implementing a large volume driving tactic, such as a sampling campaign, a brand could get a large enough sample size of consumers to respond to a survey question asking, do you agree that Simple Skincare is gentle yet effective on your skin? Then, by drilling down to see how many reviewers, who have indicated that they have sensitive skin, also agreed that the brand is gentle and effective, Simple could then use this claim in its marketing materials. Especially if you have to make sure that you have a statistically significant number of responses. But in this example, Simple Skincare could claim 9 out of 10 women with sensitive skin agree that Simple Skincare is gentle and effective, and then they would be able to use this within their marketing materials and have a way to use a claim that maybe they have always wanted to have validated, but didn't have that during the product development process. Next slide, please. So, it's really important where you are, as Rich had said, this is kind of like an ongoing response group, and you're always getting this feedback from your consumers, and it's really, really great to really extend the reach of your advocates and leverage those reviews and those marketing communications. This is primarily because we know that consumers really trust reviews, and they trust them more than some of our brand content. So this content can really add authenticity and validity to your marketing materials. And we really encourage our brands to think more than just including it in digital communications, and really including it whether it's in print or even in your in-store visuals. And we found that it really does enhance our brand's messaging and really enforce that product's appeal. It's important to ensure, though, that the original intent of the review is being maintained. Very often you will be editing that review content in some way, shortening it to fit within the parameters of whatever that creative asset will be. And so it's important to maintain the integrity so you don't misrepresent the consumer statement. Often will we always present the original review to our legal team as they're reviewing that final piece of creative, so that they can ensure that we are not misrepresenting that original claim in any way. Next slide, please. So the insights that we gain on our consumers can feed back into our marketing database, including who left a review, what their product rating was, and how many products that person has reviewed. As we showed with the Simple Skincare example, we can also gain insights on consumer preferences such as skin type, skin concerns, and customer loyalty, as well as many other types of segments, depending on how much we have customized that review submission form. So, this information really reveals consumer preferences, brand preferences, their need states, and by integrating this into our database, informing our communications, we can have a much more, personalized one-on-one communications that address a consumer's specific needs. So, for example, instead of having a general email blast with, is the first example for this Dove email, talking about the benefits of the new dry oil body wash, they could instead target consumers into 2 groups, gained through the insights that we found within the back-end system of the BAZAARVOICE workbench. And we can tailor those communications to those who have either identified that they have dry skin or who have identified that they have sensitive skin. And further, we can even leverage consumer reviews that support those needs of those consumers who have those certain skin concerns. And we find that when we target consumers based on interest or concern, we can see lifts in engagement as high as 20%. Next slide, please. And finally, this is something that's newer in our process at Unilever, but we can really use these insights to inform consumer services and R&D. So a brand of ours recently reformulated some of its products. And as with all reformulations, we expected some sort of negative reviews. There's always consumers who are going to feel upset that we've changed their favorite product in some way. However, as the brand monitored the consumer reviews being left on their products, they noticed that month by month, their average review volume started to really steadily decline. And when they dug deeper, it became, really concerning because they realized that more and more of their loyal fans who were upset, and this high volume of negative reviews was becoming alarming. Unfortunately, to make things harder, the brand was going through a soft transition, so new and old product would be live in market, and so it'd be difficult for the brand to really understand, which product were consumers talking about. So this meant that the brand really had to dig in, use some of the BV tools and BAZAARVOICE tools, I should say, BV for short. The brand looked in and they looked at reviews that were less than 3 stars, and they looked and tried to determine, which reviews mentioned new, and also which reviews were coming in either before the soft launch or after the soft launch. And then they analyzed further, and they split the different types of negative reviews into 3 categories, into the 3 most common types of consumer complaints. They then worked with the consumer services team in the call center, and they additionally dug in and tried to bucket call center complaints to see if they fell into similar categories. And they did, and they matched up pretty evenly. So they knew that this wasn't necessarily just backlash that was occurring in user reviews, that this could potentially indicate a larger issue. Additionally, using the insights gained through the survey form, the brand noticed that a lot of the negative reviews were really coming from consumers who purchased at a club store, so those larger pack items. When they looked into this, they actually did find that there was a batch issue that was sent specifically to their club, those larger size packs. So they were able to identify that issue and address it. And even though it did indicate that that batch issue was for those larger pack items, they're still monitoring this and making sure that if this isn't a larger formula issue, that it might have just been designated to just that batch. So as they kind of made these observations and they analyzed the findings, the brand developed an action plan. First, they implemented a recontact strategy where they reached out to consumers who had a negative experience with our products, especially those who may have received items from a bad batch, and sent them a new product. They're in the process of monitoring the consumer sentiment for these new products, and so far it's looking good, but they'll continue to stay in contact with those consumers and then continue to monitor how our brand is performing. Secondly, working with BAZAARVOICE, they are launching a campaign to drive positive reviews. So they actually backed in to determine how many 5-star reviews would be needed to bring up their average rating to their goal rating of a 4.0. And they then used this number based on typical response rates that they have from previous campaigns to determine how many consumers they would need to reach out to and either sample or coupon in some way to really help drive those reviews and help them attain that goal of that 4.0 rating. The next thing that they did was really create a communication plan on the product changes, and tell consumers why and explain why we made those changes, and really inform them to help ease any tensions that the consumers may have with the changes to their favorite product. And lastly, as I've kind of touched on before, they've created an ongoing management plan to track consumer sentiment to really see if those consumer complaints persist, and to determine whether or not it was just a batch issue or if it's something that we would need to look into further and make a change at a product scale. So that's it.
Great. Thank you, Jenna and Rich, for your wonderful insights there. We've now reached the question and answers portion of the program. If you do have any questions, everyone is on mute, but you can enter them into the Q&A box located in your participants panel. And while you're entering your questions, I can answer one very popular one that has been coming through. Yes, all attendees will receive a copy of the slides as well as a webinar recording when both are available. And while you're writing your questions again, I'm going to pass this over to my colleague, Danny Silverman, to provide a brief overview of our e-commerce analytics platform and our new shopper review diagnostics tool. Danny?
Great. Yeah, while we're collating questions, we'll just give a brief overview and commercial break here. CLAVIS Insight is the global leader and industry leader for CPG e-commerce and online retailer analytics. Our SaaS-based tool goes out on a daily basis to retailers all around the world, pulls back critical data like image accuracy, ratings and reviews, and search rank, and organizes it into easy-to-read and understand dashboards that help you prioritize the work to be done, identify trouble areas, and identify areas that are working as well to build on that and extend it further. If we'll just go to the other slide here, we've just recently released an update, an upgrade to our ratings and reviews capability. This is a new feature that we are offering as part of as an addition to our platform. We're bringing the content of the reviews themselves into the CLAVIS platform. We can look for trigger words that are previously nominated. We can send alerts and emails to groups such as customer service or marketing that helps take the insight that Jenna and Richard had described and brings it directly into the inbox of those who need to see it right away or want to do more longer-term trended analysis. For more information on that, there will be follow-up contact information that comes out following the webinar today. With that, and sorry, just to let you know also, if you're interested in a live demonstration of the shopper review diagnostics reporting, we will offer that on April 6th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, in Europe, and 1 p.m. Eastern Time for Americas. Okay, and with that, we're going to start going through some of these questions that have been flowing in. So we'll start with Jenna. What has been the biggest challenge for brands and for you when implementing ratings and reviews tactics?
Yeah, I really think it's been, thinking outside of the box when it comes to review driving tactics. I think our brands have been really focused on those larger scale generation campaigns like sampling or, couponing, and they work really well, but they can be expensive. And so, really thinking about how to layer on those asks when you're already having a conversation with the consumer, I think has been a challenge for many of our brands to really help support those, like I said earlier, those core items. And then additionally, getting brands to just, to stop thinking of reviews as something you check off your list, that this is something that is provides a huge wealth of knowledge on our consumers and also a valuable resource when it comes to the type of content that we might want to include or the type of insights that we might want to leverage.
Okay, great. Thank you. And the next question then is for Richard. So Rich, when it comes to syndicating reviews out to retailer sites, the BAZAARVOICE platform does some amount of moderation and filtering of those reviews. So does that mean that we're only pushing good reviews out? And what does that do in terms of credibility of the reviews for shoppers and online browsers?
Sure. So the moderation process is not about removing all the bad reviews. So the moderation process is really about making sure that the content that's posted is appropriate to be on the websites. So we have a list of rules with every brand that we work with that stipulates, what is reasonable content to have on the site. So obviously, on a very basic level, it's removing any kind of explicit words or anything that's inappropriate on that front. But it also might be if you are, for example, a highly regulated brand, there might be certain things like sort of adverse events or things that you can't post legally to the site. So it's really very much about making sure that it's appropriate content that makes it on to the sites. With regards to the syndication side of things, the way syndication works is that the retailer will receive every review that the brand has on its own site. So it's not the case that we actually filter those reviews for just the good reviews. We will send everything that's been collected, warts and all. So there's no additional filtering of those reviews, and therefore the authenticity of those reviews is still very strong as it goes through the syndication network.
Oh, great, thanks. And this next one's for Jenna, a question coming in from Aaron, who's asking about how you have correlated or included star ratings and reviews into your more traditional business performance measures. Is it part of how you dashboard and report the brand, and how do you think about it relative to more traditional performance measures?
So ratings and reviews are an indicator of, brand health measures, and so we do incorporate that on a quarterly basis, and it's something that, from a high scale, either from a category or top level brand performance, we would monitor and report back in a similar way that we would report brand health from consumer services or from some of our social listening sort of tools. So it's just another factor there.
Okay, great. And I think we'll have time here for probably just a couple more questions. Hey, so Rich, a pretty basic question here. What's more important, volume or rating?
Yeah, sure. So it's a question we get quite a lot. Volume is really the most important. And, firstly, the reason for that is the SEO benefit that we mentioned before, where fresh content is very much most important. And then, of course, for the conversion chart that we showed, where there's the biggest lift occurs between kind of 1 and 50 reviews, but then also it incrementally continues to increase. So really more is more on that. And that ultimately comes down to the fact that consumers trust volume, as it shows much more of a consensus of opinion. So if a product only has, let's say, 1 or 2 reviews and it's 5-star, the consumers, as we've seen, are much less likely to place sort of much faith in that versus, let's say, a product that has 100 reviews but maybe only comes in at a 4.5. So, having that volume is really important because it helps consumers to be able to dig into those reviews, find people who are sort of, I guess, in quotes, like me, when they're going through that process, and allows them to be able to get to a better understanding of that product overall. So absolutely, from our perspective, we would say that volume is more important than the star rating. It's not to say that scores don't matter, and obviously we supply benchmarking data to our clients to help them understand where they sit versus their peers, which we showed. And so it's still important that we aim for those benchmarks in most of the categories that we work in. And frankly, if there's a product that's scoring very badly, as Jenna alluded to, I think it could be indicative of batch issues. It could be indicative of just a poor product. So maybe there's some work to be done on that side too. So both important, but definitely volume is the key over the score overall.
Okay, great, thanks. And we have time for one more question here. For those whose questions we didn't get to, we will follow up with you directly, try to get answers for you and send them to you via email. The last one here for Jenna, just riffing a little bit here on a question from Steve. Generally speaking, what would you say is the hallmark of a successful ratings and review campaign? If there's one particular element, what would that be?
I mean, I think it's just, you know, when you're engaging with consumers, to really express to them that you want to hear their opinion and to have it be more conversational, regardless of whether you are doing a larger sampling campaign or to you know, provide an ask within an email or some sort of, you know, social response. Providing that relationship and encouraging that relationship with the consumer, making them feel special, making them feel like you as a brand want to hear from them, hear their input, their feedback, potentially their concerns, you know, puts the consumer in a more positive mindset. And I think that's, you know, what Rich had alluded to earlier is that, you know, if you are not asking for reviews, if you are not driving those programs, you are only going to get, you know, the two poles of the review sentiment, people who really love your product and people who have had a really negative experience. And more often than not, the people who are really incentivized to leave a comment are those ones who have had a negative experience. And so by encouraging consumers in one way or another, and again, having a more conversational, relationship building sort of approach, I think will allow brands to drive those, you know, high 3s, low 4-star ratings that are really the meat of what make up, you know, your review volumes and your review score.
Great. Well, thank you, Jenna, Rich, and Danny for your wonderful insights and presentation today. Speaking of reviews, there will be a survey which will appear as you exit the webinar today. Please do complete the survey. Let us know your thoughts about the webinar, its content, and certainly you'll have an opportunity to request more information both on CLAVIS Insight and BAZAARVOICE itself. As a thank you, all participants completing the survey will receive a copy of our newest white paper, Online Channel Jumpstart for Brands, 5 Steps to Success. Thank you all once again for attending. As I did mention, the recording and slides will be emailed out within the next 1 to 2 days. And that email will also include links to register for the Shopper Review Diagnostic demo registration on April 6th. Thank you all once again, and have a wonderful rest of the afternoon. Goodbye.